So this whole kind of principle around, I think, like scaling is this idea of theory of constraint. So generally, a business has a constraint somewhere, and what we're doing in setting these optimizations or setting these goals is we're identifying a constraint in the business. I think a lot of people in this space, it is just kind of like, hey, we see this trend on social media, influencer marketing. Let's go try that out and see what it does, right? That creates a lot of misses. What we really want to do is really analyze the business to figure out where those key constraints are, get data around it, validate that, and then solve for it.
This is Social Pulse Podcast Agency Edition, your go-to guide to solving your biggest marketing agency challenges authentically. I'm your host, Mike Galton, and each episode is an honest and frank look at what agencies go through, from turning clients to tackling tech and ideas that you can apply to your own business. And now, the rest of today's episode. Welcome back to Social Pulse Podcast Agency Edition, where each and every week we're talking to marketing agencies like you, going through many of the same struggles you're going through and sharing their stories. Subscribe to find in each episode the inspiration, the motivation, and the perspiration that go into growing and scaling agencies like yours. Now, managing multiple client campaigns sometimes feels like juggling chainsaws while riding a unicycle. Your team is drowning in tasks, metrics are all over the place, and just when you think you've got one client's success figured out, another starts slipping. Every agency owner knows this pain. The constant pressure to deliver consistent results across different channels, the endless status updates, and the gnawing feeling that there must be a better way to run things. Well, today, we're joined by a true innovator in agency operations, Hal Smith, founder of H Street Digital and the architect behind a game-changing 90-day sprint system that's revolutionizing how agencies deliver results. Having managed over $100 million in advertising campaigns for everyone from startups to Fortune 50 companies, Hal has mastered the art of turning complex marketing chaos into predictable success. And he's here to show exactly how he's transformed traditionally messy processes like media buying, creative testing, and attribution into a systematic approach that's changing the game for agencies everywhere. Hey, Cal, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Mike. I love that intro. It's very, very on point description you have there of agency life.
Right? Yeah. Everyone listening has been there. They're feeling it. They understand it. They don't want to feel that way. So hopefully we can help them kind of get over some of this stuff or wrap their head around that sprint system. But before we dive into it, I wonder if you could just share what led you to realize that agencies needed a more structured approach to client success. Because I know some of the agencies I talk to, their solutions are, well, we just need more clients, or we need better clients, or we need better people. Sounds like you've got a different approach.
Yeah, appreciate that question. And I think one interesting point that you've already kind of highlighted with that, with more people or more clients, is looking at from just purely kind of business perspective, right? Like, how do you scale and how do you scale effectively? And the kind of the key question mark there, especially around more clients, is uh, you know, a lot of times it's hedging against churn and knowing that existing clients might leave, right? Um, the other thing is you know added with that assumption is by bringing on more people or more clients, you're assuming that things will go better with that higher scale, which is never true. And so it's really, really important to figure out how to build out systems and processes that actually allow you to scale. So when you take on new people or new clients, it incrementally gets better. And then kind of the key thing is with the first point is how do you make sure that your existing clients don't churn? What we really have identified with this 90-day sprint system that we've developed is identifying a good strategy that we can implement with our clients in 90-day chunks so they know exactly what's coming. And there's a lot of clarity around what are the most important action items effectively that we need to be working on with the client over those next 90 days. When we have those 90 days mapped out, it's pretty clear what we're going to be doing. The client is confident in what we're doing. We have a good strategy mapped out as well as the underlying tactics that we're going to execute on. And it just makes the flow of work much easier. Um, what made me kind of realize this is we had, in starting H Street, we kind of a typical way you start, you just take on any business that you can get. And for us, that meant taking on a lot of smaller direct to consumer e-commerce businesses. So we took on a lot of businesses that were doing between $1 and $5 million in revenue. And the important thing with that is companies at that size are very chaotic. Generally, it's a small team. It's heavily founder led, and that founder is extremely busy, and they really don't have time to think. And so what happens is that team starts trying things randomly. And it's a lot of the kind of phrase throw it against the wall, see what sticks. It's a lot of kind of disparate tactics that they're trying every week, every month, and then they're dropping and trying something new. And there's a little bit of amnesia going on where they try something, they forget about it, they come and try it again 6 months later, it doesn't work, forget about it again, try it again. And so what we really identified is this is a really kind of messy space, and you really do need to think about what is a good playbook to implement for these types of companies, so they can effectively scale and they can scale gradually and incrementally, and there's kind of continued compounding success with these brands. So that's the one important thing. The second thing we found, especially with these 90-day sprint plans, is 90 days is just the most ideal time frame for people to work within. And this is something I've learned from reading a lot of just business scaling books. The kind of key one here that really turned like opened my eyes to this is a book called Traction, which is like EOS, business operating system. The key thing with that is effectively the 90-day rocks. So understanding that like basically any business in order to scale successfully generally works in 90-day sprint cycles because that's the longest amount of time that people can kind of hold in their heads to understand like to basically be clear about what they need to be doing to scale. And then two, that is it's also the longest amount of time to work on more complex tasks that involve multiple people and multiple things getting in place. So we wanted to organize the chaos. We wanted to put it in a framework that was understandable and digestible. And then we wanted to put it in a place where we could work across what we consider the most important performance levers for our clients. And so with that is we realized for especially the clients at this size, media buying, creative, offer strategy, landing page optimization, as well as the reporting and attribution infrastructure were the most important things to allow a brand to go from $1 million to five. And then we eventually found out from five to 10. And so for us, those were, we realized we need to create these sprint cycles in 90 days. And then we need to figure out a structure and how to work across media buying, creative, CRO, et cetera, in those 90-day sprints as well. And so that really was the genesis behind this. And really, if the through line here is any scaling business, any startup generally should follow some type of scaling methodology, regardless of where you're kind of applying that to the business. Most business owners go with the business operating system like EOS at this stage. We effectively took some of the EOS model as well as other business operating systems and applied it specifically to performance media buying.
That is fascinating. We're huge fans of EOS at Agorapulse and in this show. We talked about it many times. We did an entire episode about EOS with Matt Hines that I'll link to in the show notes below for you folks if maybe you're not familiar with that particular operating system. But I also love how you've applied it in this situation to like you said, performance marketing, but also you've attached it to client expectations, right?
Hmm.
I know many times in working with a client, they want to know when they're going to see results. And in marketing, the most common answers are, well, we'll see, we'll check back on you every week, and we'll watch things progress. And it's all very vague and unsatisfying to the
Yep.
client. And there's no set expectation. You go into it with a 90-day sprint system, they know that in 90 days they're going to see something. I imagine part of that system is you're telling them exactly what they're going to see. So walk us through that framework. What are some of the key components in there that just make it work for you and your clients?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that that is a key thing too with expectation setting. So fundamentally, it's we have SMART goals, right? So each kind of key objective that we want to work across is set in a SMART goal format. And then the key thing with the acronym SMART, the M stands for measurable. So we actually commit ourselves to a specific metric that we're trying to hit with whatever action item we're running or optimization we're running across campaigns or any type of deliverable. We always want to make sure we set a metric, and then we're trying to hit that metric at the end of the time period. The second piece of it is we've identified that there are certain optimizations. There's certain deliverables that's 30 days, others might take a whole 90 days. So what we try to do across this SMART goal, we basically have SMART goals for 30 days, for 60 days, and 90 days. And then we break it out for each of these service delivery lines. So we have it on the media buying side, we have it on the CRO side, we have it on the creative side, as well as reporting and analytics. So each of those have their own individual SMART goals for each of those time periods. And what we do is we set that at the beginning of the sprint, and then effectively for the next 90 days, we're working against those goals. What that allows us to do actually is to remove a lot of the noise in the relationship, because what we actually fell into early on was, what you were speaking to is our clients' expectations around performance. We basically found ourselves spinning our wheels trying to chase random tactical things, hoping they would improve performance, and we would adjust like on a week to week basis. We learned that some actions that you take, you don't actually see the results in a week, right? You might see those results over 90 days. So we really tried to figure out what things we should be doing and what time horizons we would see the results in, and then what metrics we really should be tracking against to make sure we actually had success in driving that initiative. So the fundamental structure really is their SMART goals. Your SMART goals set by different time horizons, and then their SMART goals set by different service lines.
That is fantastic. This is such an interesting approach. I'm wondering how it differs from just normal media buying and other kinds of traditional approaches that honestly most of the agencies listening right now are probably doing.
Yeah. So I think I'll kind of take this piece by piece. So on media buying, generally what happens is the media buyers will go into accounts, depending on how high touch they are. Sometimes some agencies, some media buyers will only look at an account once a month. They'll do some kind of gradual optimizations or write up a couple of bullet points about that and send it to the client. That's basically it. Other ones, I would say, effectively over manage the accounts where they're in and making these small little optimizations every single day. And it creates a lot of noise and it's basically busy work, but the clients feel good that someone's in the account just messing with things every day. But the kind of key thing here with media buying is it's a lot of effort, it's a lot of energy, and a lot of time spent doing basically ineffective optimizations that you actually aren't really quantifying the impact of. And I think most agencies kind of lean towards the monthly optimization cycle that is also still pretty low impact, and it's typically not really validating. There's no like goal they're trying to like focus on. Like generally agencies work with like a ROAS goal or like a target CAC goal. However, like they're not actually trying to tie those optimizations towards that goal and saying, if I do X, we will see an improvement in CAC in 30 days by Y percentage. Generally, it's just like, hey, we're trying all these different things, and oh look, the CAC improved. On the creative side, good creative agencies do build good testing frameworks. And so what they typically do is they do like research around the personas, what creative angles they want to test, what formats they want to test. And then they create a creative testing roadmap. And generally that roadmap follows a monthly cadence. But this is typically not in conjunction with media buying. So the creative team or creative agency wants to go test these concepts, and it typically is in conflict with the media buying team. What we've tried to do with this solution here is integrate both media buying and creative, and then also tie both of those to these overarching goals for 30, 60, and 90 days. And then CRO, I think what's most different about CRO today for a lot of CRO agencies is dedicated CRO agencies typically work across the entire website. It's very isolated from the creative side and media buying side. But what we focus on is specific landing page and product page conversion rate optimization. And that is generally tied with whatever we're trying to do on a creative testing perspective as well as media buying. So it's all integrated. And we're trying to run CRO tests that will improve conversion rates, that will then improve the way our meta campaigns are running or Google Ads campaigns are running. And we try to also fit those tests into these same time frames. So it's all kind of happening at the same time. And then the other thing on the other side, where it's just landing page optimization for CRO, a lot of times those types of CRO agencies just make good looking product pages, but there's no like validation on impact. And really, obviously, in kind of creating this attribution and reporting infrastructure, really make sure that we're have the statistically significant results on these product pages. So we are basically improving CACs or scaling spend at the target CAC that our client might have.
I imagine so many folks listening are nodding their head over and over and over again, or even chuckling to themselves at some of the comments that you're making, some of the scenarios you're painting that they're living through right now. So I'm sure they're interested in figuring out how they could adopt some of this themselves. So let's talk about implementation.
Mm.
What do you think the first step is then for an agency if they want to start moving towards this kind of a structured approach?
Yeah, so what we did is we created a test tracker that we implemented for creative and media buying and then CRO. And we basically created this index. We logged every single test we were running, and we did that for about 6 months. And what that allowed us to do is we did do stuff in this kind of more disjointed way. However, we were just logging every single test we did, and from that, also logging the impact of that test. And generally, it always comes down to improving the customer acquisition cost or allowing us to scale spend at the target customer acquisition cost or CAC. And what we were able to do is aggregate those learnings and figure out the most important things that we should be doing. And then that allowed us to basically better prioritize things that we were putting into these 30, 60, 90-day plans. So that was the first thing, is just like collecting the data basically of what these optimizations do. The second thing we did was a lot of research and kind of training on different prioritization models. And so one is called like the ICE scoring model, which is like the impact, confidence, and ease. Basically, running our optimization recommendations or things that we're putting into these plans through that model to make sure it's like a worthwhile venture. We also did, like basically training around like the Eisenhower matrix, figuring out things that were like, potentially not that urgent, but we knew were high impact. Also using like the Moscow method, and then also going and kind of doing training and research around scaling frameworks like EOS, and then also like from the Lean Startup. But I think first step was collecting data. Second step was researching prioritization models and basically scaling methodologies. And then the third step is looking at both of those two, understanding what we believe to be like truly high impact things that had like relatively low effort to implement, and then kind of building out a framework for that. So we actually know we basically have a menu now of options where if we go or sitting with a client, we're looking at performance, we're like, hey, let's go take these things out, put them in 30 days or put them in 60 days and 90 days. It makes it pretty seamless and easy for us.
I love that you keep looking at different frameworks and approaches for each step of the business, for each step of the process for the client that you guys want to improve because you understand that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Other people have already thought about so many of these different things. Let's just go find out what other people are using and adapt it. Folks, we're talking with Hal Smith about methods for scaling, saving time, operating more efficiently. And I've got some more questions you aren't going to want to miss. But first, let's make sure you're also saving time with your social media management.
When I take a look at the biggest core benefit for AgoraPulse, I have to look at two sides of the equation. I have to look at what it does for us as far as managing our community and all of the conversation management tools, which I appreciate so much. But from a far more pragmatic point of view, it saves us money. It saves us a lot of money because of the productivity the features that are built in with how it manages those conversations. We don't waste time. We're efficient.
AgoraPulse allows me to get through all my messages and my replies really quickly. That's probably the number one reason for me wanting to use the tool. It saves so much time.
A big draw for me with AgoraPulse was the ability to manage my YouTube comments. That is a huge feature for me, and here's why. Because up until then, I basically would have to go into my social media manager system to do everything there, and then I'd have to log out, go back into YouTube, and do the same thing there. Now, when you are managing multiple clients, this becomes a huge waste of time, right? And what we want to do is streamline that efficiency. So we can log into one website now. We can manage all of our major social profiles there, and we're able to serve our clients with more clarity and purpose.
They worked with us. They helped train us on how to get everything up and going, and we were able to cancel out all the other tools that we didn't need anymore. So it saved us a lot of time and a lot of headache for my team members as they're, now they only have one tool that they can maximize their clients in.
So, Hal, I'm wondering if you ran into any kind of resistance when you're trying to implement these systems, whether with team members or maybe even clients? And if so, how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I love that question because yes, there's a lot of resistance actually. I think it's because it's already new. It's new both for obviously team members we've hired and then obviously with clients too. A couple of key things I had to really kind of develop in setting client expectations as well as team member expectations for this. One is this whole kind of principle around I think like scaling is this idea of theory of constraint. So generally, a business has a constraint somewhere, and what we're doing in setting these optimizations or setting these goals is we're identifying a constraint in the business. We're creating a test that basically validates that constraint as well as what could potentially solve for it. And then once we identify that, we implement the solution, and then ideally that constraint goes away. So one is it's really explaining that concept to clients as well as training team members on that to really understand that kind of theory and philosophy around what we're doing. I think a lot of people in this space uh, it is just kind of like, hey, we see this trend on social media, influencer marketing. Let's go try that out and see what it does, right? Um,
Mm.
that creates a lot of misses. What we really want to do is really analyze the business to figure out what those key constraints are. Get data around it, validate that, and then solve for it. And so, like one example could be, we have like fairly efficient campaigns on, digital ad platforms like Meta and Google, fairly good brand presence. However, like let's say their kind of sales been dipping over the last couple of months. One thing we might identify is their new customer offer is just not competitive with the market, right? And so that's a constraint because basically, if they can develop a more competitive offer, if they can frame that correctly, build good creative around it, they'll have better click through rates and better conversion rates. Therefore, obviously allow us to accelerate their customer acquisition. So we would want to run tests around that, and we want to do this in this kind of structured way. So we have like clear data that proves this was successful. So basically explaining that concept and kind of showing it to clients in a real life example with that client, I think is super effective. The kind of key thing was part of that is just like how do you actually measure impact, right? So we would have to collect data first, show them what that key number is, and tell them, hey, we're going to improve this number. And then the other key thing is over what time horizon, right? Because to your kind of an earlier point, if their expectations around time horizons are too short, like they want to see improvement in a week, they're going to get incredibly frustrated. But some things just take longer, amounts of time to solve. And so setting the right time horizon expectation has been extremely important for us. And then especially on the performance media buying side, figuring out the attribution of things. So like a Meta, Google ads, cross-channel attribution, whatever it takes in terms of the customer journey. Really figuring that out in the context of what we're planning. Those are all really important. But in terms of how we actually like kind of executed on this, the other key thing I found we had to do was we actually had to create the whole strategy ourselves without telling the client. So we create the whole 90-day plan. And then we had to say, hey, we've developed this new approach here. We really want to share it with you. And then we would show them the 90-day plan. And then they would immediately like want to give us feedback. Like, oh no, we should be doing this in like 30 days or 60 days or like take this off or whatever. But they adopted to it, by wanting to work on it with us. And then we created this kind of collaborative atmosphere where we both worked on it. What I tried to do before was ask clients, like, what are your priorities, right? Or what do you really want to see done over the next quarter? And they were like, oh, yeah, we don't know, like maybe this thing or whatever. And it was really hard to solicit the feedback or information from the clients. But I realized you kind of have to present them something. And then they're like, wait a second, like, I want to do this, this, and this. And then you could work on it collaboratively. And that really got it done. But the key friction I actually experienced was internally with team members because basically I had some team members who did not want to commit to some of these goals, and they effectively didn't want to be, responsible for them. And I think as a professional service business like we are, as somebody that as a performance advertising agency that we are, you need to drive true impact for your clients, and you need to be able to set these goals and commit to them. Because I believe truly, if you're not responsible for outcomes, you're not providing a professional service. And so, I had team members who are no longer with us. When we rolled this out, it basically caused a lot of conflict. Who said to me, "We're not responsible for outcomes." Like we can do stuff on media buying, but there's, after a point, it's out of our hands. I'm like, that's not true. Like they're paying us to help them scale their brand. They're paying us to put in systems that will allow them to scale new customers. We're going to commit to these goals. And, a big part of that was me knowing that we had all this historic data so we could actually have, clear metrics and like we knew what optimizations would drive what levels of impact. So I was confident kind of presenting some of these goals, but some of the team members weren't. And it was a really hard conversation with some of them. But yeah, I would say that was a little bit of a hard kind of rough patch to go through in terms of business. But we have a team now that is really inspired by this, and they really want to learn this and be effective in these plans, and it's worked out really well.
That's amazing. And I can only just imagine how great it was to work with a client who looked at a plan like that and then wants to actually collaborate with you.
Yeah.
That's gotta feel great. Were there any like really challenging client situations where putting in this kind of a system actually helped turn things around for them?
Yeah. So I think, yeah, I have a good example with a client where it's a high end luxury skincare product. They have an incredible brand, and as part of having a great brand, they really are focused on their creative. They want to make sure their creative has the same quality that the kind of founder has for like the vision for the brand. Across the website, across any type of content that's published by the brand. The challenge with that is when you run performance advertising campaigns, generally the majority of those campaigns are what are called prospecting campaigns. And a big piece of prospecting is bottom of funnel campaigns, which is like direct response creative. Response creative is very transactional. It's, hey, we solved this problem for you, or we help you reach this aspiration. Click now to buy it, right? It's very direct. A lot of the creative is effectively kind of ugly, and a lot of good creative lower funnel is it like taps into this concept around like pattern interrupt, where it's like it shows up on your feed very differently from other ads, and it basically is thumb stopping. It forces people to really be like, hey, what is this? And they check it out and click on the ad. Good lower funnel direct response creative is not great from a brand perspective. So what this meant is we had a lot of challenges with this client in getting creative approved. And some of the creative that was our best performing creative, ultimately we had to pause out because the founder really did not like the way it looked.
Got it.
However, when we started implementing some of these structures around creative testing, especially in these 30, 60, 90-day plans, when we had set these goals and we had kind of clearly defined the KPIs at the front end, defined our the key metrics we wanted to hit with certain creative. We were able to kind of set expectations at the beginning of what we believe to be the impact of this creative. We would then launch it, test it, realize those goals, bring it back to the client and be like, hey, we this is what we told you we are going to do. We now did it, and we now beat your expectations in terms of performance. And I think just having that kind of like clarity and consistency in terms of how we set these goals at the beginning, how we achieve them, and how we create this structure around testing, really it creates a lot of trust with the client, and they're willing to try things more often. And effectively, we were able to try a lot more different creative concepts and ideas that were highly effective. That at the beginning would have been an absolute non-starter. The client would have not approved them ever. The other kind of key thing we did there is the reporting attribution side is really important for us as well. And they had a kind of a messy reporting infrastructure. So over 30 days, we were able to figure out a good attribution time window to be optimizing towards. In 60 days, we could figure out a good cross channel attribution. And then in the 90 days, we actually figured out a good way to build kind of proxy KPIs and ad platforms that tie directly to their source of truth. And that all, those things took those different time windows to complete just because you needed enough data in those time frames to kind of validate some of this attribution infrastructure we were setting up. But the kind of outcome was all of a sudden we were able to really kind of create a system that made it clear that what we were testing in terms of creative was super effective in driving new customers. And so it was another thing where this integrated approach allowed us to be really effective on the reporting side, but also really kind of backed up what we're doing from a creative testing perspective.
That is such a cool story. I can just imagine. I mean, any brand that is strong, it's established in its brand, they got there by adhering to brand principles, having very specific brand guidelines and being consistent in that. If you're thinking skincare and other kind of tangential industries, you're thinking very subdued tones, beautiful people, beautiful product lighting, which all looks the same across the board. And you come in and say, no, we're going to do something very, very different. And I can see where that would have put up a bunch of red flags for executives. But it's cool that, how you approached it, data driven, very specific mile markers and guidelines, and you got around that and you showed success. So that's fantastic. My last question for you, Hal, I'm just wondering, are there any tools or software that you recommend for agencies who might want to implement this kind of an approach or framework to how they're working with clients?
Yeah, this is so I can't say that we have specific software that we've leveraged that's worked well for this framework. We use Notion, and Notion's a great platform for documentation and project management for us. And we build out these 90-day plans in Notion. And Notion has these great integrations where we can take different action items out of the 90-day plans and assign them as tasks to people, and then we can kind of track it against these timeframes. So I would say from like a project management or organization standpoint, Notion's a great tool. But outside of that, a lot of the other tools that are effective for us basically just connect with the different service lines that we're providing. So, for example, like we use attribution software like Triple Whale or Northbeam generally with most of our clients. We use like post-purchase surveys, like Fairing, for example, to kind of further validate what we're doing. Um, the landing page optimization side, like highly recommend Replo and Shoplift are great tools. And then, outside of that, most of the other tools have to do with like creative. So like Motion's a good tool for us. A lot of it's kind of tactical tools that relate to the different services. But, I think, for this, it's really Notion is our main platform and how we kind of build out this process.
That makes sense because, like I said, we have talked about EOS on previous shows, mostly for internal to the agency, and we recommended tools like 90. We use 90 here at
Oh
AgoraPulse
yeah. Yeah. We've
to
been
help
looking
us
at that.
internally. Yeah, follow the EOS system, but I don't know how well that would work when you're trying to merge it across client work and different clients. I would just have to say, no, that wouldn't work at all. It would only be good for the internal agency. So those are great recommendations. We'll have all those links in the show notes. Hal, you've been fantastic. This has been really fascinating. I'm sure you've got those listeners' minds buzzing with ideas and questions. So if they want to reach out to you with more thoughts and questions, where should they go?
Yeah, best place really is just to shoot me a message on LinkedIn. Call me. I mean, I'm Hal Smith, and then if you search Hal Smith and H Street, you'll likely find me. So yeah, just shoot me a DM on LinkedIn. That's really the best way to reach me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Hal. Thank you, all of you, for listening. Again, we'll have all of Hal's links in the show notes below. And don't forget to find the Social Pulse Podcast Agency Edition on Apple and drop me a review. Let me know what you think about this episode. What do you think about some of the past episodes? Who else would you like us to talk to or talk about? I'd love to know what you think. Until next time. Thank you for listening to another episode of Social Pulse Podcast Agency Edition, hosted by Mike Alton and powered by AgoraPulse, the #1 rated social media management solution, which you can learn more about at agorapulse.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player and be sure to leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us.